Hi guys, this is just a quick video about the titles that we are including in the introduction of our film. So the first thing we had to think about was the ordering of the titles, because there's always a specific order which the titles have to go in. Some of them weren't completely necessary for our video production, and just to keep it short or shorter than it possibly would be if we had all the titles in our production, we eliminated a couple that we didn't really think were necessary, such as makeup artists and things like that, costume designers, which we really didn't feel were important enough to have in our credits because we didn't really have them, to be honest. So the first thing we wanted or needed to have was the very beginning of a video. We planned to have a live action shot of our, instead of having a logo, a company logo or a production company logo, we decided to do a live action shot, which we're not entirely decided on what yet, but we, for example, like 20th Century Fox, they have, obviously the opening credits, but yeah, we want to do something like that. And over the top, we would have to put the production company or the name of the studio. That's a very important part. You see that at the beginning of every film. The next title we needed was starring. No, producer name. So who produced the film. The next title would be starring, so who was casting. Technically, usually they put cast, but instead we just put starring because there's only two characters in the part of the film that you will see. So instead of putting cast, we had starring instead because there are only two characters. The next title we needed was the film's title, so the name of the film, which again we haven't quite thought of yet. So we'll have that later. The next would be featuring, so who would be featuring the film, things like that. The next was quite an important one because our brief states that we're not allowed to use music with copyright on it. So this title is music composed by, and we had to ensure that we prove that that music isn't under copyright and we're allowed to use it without permission. The next would be another important one, edited by. I feel that in the editing process is the point where everything in the video comes together and it's finally complete. So, yep. The next one we had to do was producer or produced by, and the last was director. And you always see the director last because it's just before the start of the film and it's the main, that there would be no show or film without the director. He's the main person, so obviously that one has to stand out a bit more than the rest. Okay, so the next thing we had to think about is the titles themselves, as in appearance. So we had to think about color, fonts, positioning on the screen, and all that kind of stuff. And we was trying to think for ages, like what would be the best way for them to look, until I personally suggested to Dave a quite neat idea, which we did discuss about in class. I suggested that we implemented the titles into the action itself. So for example, instead of adding them over the top in the editing process, we would actually have them physically written in the action that we're doing. So for example, in one stage of the storyboard, a book slams shut, and the title of the book will be the third in the sequence of titles, which will be the film title. So the title of the book is the name of the film, and we'll really emphasize that in the camera. Another way we're going to do this is he'll be reading a newspaper article and he'll highlight a specific word or a few specific words, which happen to be, I don't know, for example, who the music was composed by, or something like that. But the only problem I had with this is that I was slightly concerned that it wouldn't stand out enough. So I was worried that in some parts it might be hard to read. For example, the audience might not specifically focus on that point. So we had to think of ways to really focus on that specific piece of text or that specific area of the screen, which is why we're doing things like the highlighting and focusing in specifically to that part. So as to colour, again, we need it to stand out, but at the same time, it's going to be a crime film, so we don't want it to be silly, bright pink, red, purple colours, because it just wouldn't suit the nature of the film. So we decided to just keep it dark, quite dull, but again, ensure that they stand out by adding certain aspects to the titles.